Um, so to answer your question, this is a tough decision, no question. Looking back at the way we ended the previous season, falling just short of the Stanley Cup, and the two seasons that Kris had with the team, it was it was a decision we made that we felt that he had earned that contract extension. And then as this season went on, at the end of the year, when I met with the group in the media and my availability, I mentioned that we were going to do a thorough review to try to understand, how we got to this point. We had a disappointing end to our season, losing in the first round. And when you take the season as a whole, it was a year we never were able to get going. It wasn't just a slow start or maybe a tough stretch in the middle of the year. Like, those things happen to all teams. You have some ups and downs, but we didn't have a lot of ups this year. We were kind of right around the middle all year long.
There's a question hanging over Edmonton right now that nobody wants to say out loud, but everybody is thinking. When the Oilers front office sits down to figure out who coaches this team next season, whose voice matters most in that room? And here's the thing, you already know the answer. Connor McDavid is not just the best player on the Edmonton Oilers. He is the reason this organization exists the way it does right now. Every major decision made in the last 2 years has been filtered through one question. Does this make McDavid happy enough to stay? And when you understand that, you start to understand just how significant the next coaching hire truly is. This isn't a normal front office decision. This is a negotiation with the most important asset in franchise history happening in plain sight. Let's go back to 2023, because context matters here. In the span of about 3.5 months, the Oilers made 3 moves that individually might look like routine hockey business. Collectively, they tell a very different story. First, Jeff Jackson, McDavid's former agent, the man who negotiated his contracts, was handed the title of CEO of hockey operations. Then Kris Knoblauch, the coach who developed McDavid back in his junior days with the Erie Otters, was brought in to run the bench. And then Connor Brown, McDavid's former line mate on those same Otters teams, was added to the roster. 3 moves, 3 months, one very clear message. Edmonton was building a world around its superstar. And it worked, at least in terms of getting McDavid to sign that extension. But somewhere between the contract signing and the first-round exit to Anaheim, the whole carefully constructed project started to fall apart. Because here's the uncomfortable reality sitting at the center of all of this. Kris Knoblauch guided this team to back-to-back Stanley Cup Finals appearances. That is not a small thing. That is an enormous thing. Most coaches never sniff the finals once. Knoblauch did it in consecutive years, and it still was not enough. He's out the door, joining the unemployment line, while the team he took to 2 straight finals tries to figure out what comes next. So, what happened? The Oilers looked at a back-to-back finals coach and said thank you, but no thank you. Why? Look at what was being said publicly all season long, and you do not need to read between many lines. March 21st, Edmonton loses to Tampa Bay 5-2. It's a bad loss, but those happen. What doesn't usually happen is the opposing team's captain standing at the microphone afterward and spending what felt like an eternity praising the other team's coach. McDavid called the Lightning perfectly coached, said every player knew exactly what they were doing at every moment, said it was impressive, said they were extremely well organized, extremely well rehearsed. And then he said that when you do manage to break them down, they have a great goalie to bail them out anyway. When you translate all of that from polite hockey speak into plain English, what McDavid was actually saying is that his own team was none of those things. Imperfectly coached, disorganized, unrehearsed. The contrast was not accidental. No superstar accidentally spends 3 minutes praising the opposing coach in that level of specific detail after a loss to his own team. And McDavid was not alone. Before the Olympic break in February, Leon Draisaitl walked up to the podium after a loss to Calgary, a division rival, the kind of game you are simply supposed to win, and dropped what might be the most direct critique of a coaching staff you will hear from a player who is still technically employed by that organization. He said it starts with the coaches. He said everybody. He said you are never going to win if only 4 or 5 guys are going the right direction, and it starts at the top. Draisaitl is not a player known for media drama. He does not typically say inflammatory things for the sake of saying them. When he says something like that, he means it, and everyone in that locker room knows he means it. Put McDavid's comments and Draisaitl's comments together, and you have the 2 best players on the team, arguably 2 of the 5 best players in the entire league, both publicly signaling in their own ways that the coaching situation was a problem. And those words did not fall on deaf ears. When the season ended and both players stood at the podium again and said the team had taken a significant step backward this year, the organizational decision was already made. Knoblock was done. So was assistant coach Mark Stewart. Now, the search begins, and it is not a quiet, methodical search happening in a back room somewhere. It is happening under an enormous spotlight, with the entire hockey world watching to see who Edmonton chooses, and more importantly, why they choose them. Because the real question is not just who can coach this team. The real question is who can coach this team in a way that satisfies Connor McDavid. Those 2 things might not be the same person. Think about the John Cooper comparison for a second, because McDavid made it himself. Cooper has spent over a decade in Tampa building a culture of accountability, structure, and trust with his players. His teams know their roles. They execute systems with precision. They do not wilt in big moments. McDavid watched that from across the ice on a bad night and clearly felt something was missing in his own building. Whether the next Oilers coach can replicate that culture or something like it is the real test. And yet, Cooper still lost in the first round too. Both teams are heading into an off-season with questions. The difference is Tampa's questions are about roster construction. Edmonton's questions run deeper. They are about identity, about accountability, about whether the organizational structure that bent itself into a pretzel to keep its star player happy actually created an environment where that star player could thrive. The answer this season suggests it did not. Whoever gets this job is walking into one of the most scrutinized coaching positions in professional hockey. They are inheriting a roster built around 2 generational talents who have already shown they are not afraid to publicly express frustration. They are following a coach who took the team to consecutive finals and still got fired. And they are doing all of it knowing that the superstar captain's fingerprints, one way or another, will be all over whatever decision gets made. So, yeah, maybe Connor McDavid does not technically hire the next head coach of the Edmonton Oilers. But if you genuinely believe he is not in that conversation, you have not been paying attention to anything this franchise has done for the last 2 years.